kind of stuff.
Wonderful. So we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Volunteers Town Hall for building the Partnerism campaign with CPS. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Rian for a welcome. I do want to say we have a variety of people who are joining us today from all over the world. Some people are brand new to partnerism or the work of CPS. Some of you have been involved with CPS or with Rian's work for many years, and today is an opportunity to learn and share what's currently happening. And at the end of the conversation, we will have an opportunity for you to get involved. So with that, Rihanna, I'd love to turn it over to you to welcome everyone.
Well, all I want to say is welcome. I am delighted that we are having this session. I want to thank Rosie and Lila and the rest of the team for making this possible. And onward, and I turn it over back to our wonderful Rosie.
Okay, great. Rian, first of all, thank you for all the work that you've been doing with CPS for the last 35 plus years, and the work that you've done on the Equal Rights Amendment dating back to almost 60 years ago. You are a leading advocate for women and equality in the world, and your work has touched the lives of so many people. And so on behalf of all of those of us who volunteer and work with you and everyone on this call, thank you for all that you've done.
Well, thank you again. What keeps me going to a very large extent is working with wonderful people such as all of you.
Likewise. Lisa writes in, I'm in love with Rihanna already. I second that. Okay, so we're going to get started. And today I'm going to give a presentation that will last about 10 to 15 minutes. And then Rian will share some thoughts, and then we'll open the floor to questions. And today we're going to talk a little bit about partnerism, what it is, what the campaign is that we're building, why it's relevant now, and what we're leading up to at the end of this summer that you can get involved with. And there are lots of different ways for you to volunteer. So I'll share more about that at the end of the presentation. So give me just 1 second here to share my screen. Hang on, we're going through the joys of technology. There we go. Okay, so you should be able to see that. If you can't, just make a note in the chat box. So today we're talking about making partnerism mainstream. And the first thing that we want to discuss is what the heck is partnerism? You've probably never heard of this word before if you're brand new to Rian's work. And you may only know this word if you read her book, The Real Wealth of Nations. So what the heck is partnerism? Well, it starts with Rian's work. In 1987, she published The Chalice and the Blade and introduced this concept of the domination partnership social scale. And on one side of it, we have domination, and domination systems are really focused on including certain groups and excluding other groups. It's based on categories. Those categories can be gender, it can be man over woman, man over nature, man over man, it can be race over race. And what we have in that categorization and creating a supremacy, a hierarchy of supremacy, is that we end up with domination in this pyramid. And that domination is maintained by force and fear and violence. And the result of this hierarchy of domination, where we have categories that are considered supreme to others, is we end up with inequality. And the domination systems are characterized by violence and abuse throughout the systems, ranging from, on the small scale, within the family, such as child abuse and domestic violence, all the way to our political systems and economic systems. So let's dive a little bit deeper into domination systems. So some of the in-groups and out-groups I mentioned, the key ones are man over man, man over woman, and man over nature. As I mentioned, those rankings are maintained by force and fear and violence. One of the results of this is that the economic systems that are oriented towards domination create an uncaring economics, where the economy ignores the damages that it causes to humanity and to the planet for the gain of some. Part of the issue with domination systems is that they only account for part of our economic sectors. And in just a few minutes, I'll explain more about those. An issue with domination systems is that it's winners takes all, which is really counter to the psychology of human beings. Most of us have more fun and enjoy life more when we get to share things. And there are numerous studies that show this, that we're happiest when we get to share with each other. And the last thing I'll say about domination systems is that we're currently in a period of regression. These regression periods happen, they follow times when we have periods of progression towards partnership systems. So those periods have been the period of abolition, the period of working for women's suffrage, the period of working for civil rights and winning those rights. And we see in our policies that come after that, that we regress back towards domination. There's a constriction. And why is that? It's because we haven't addressed the underlying issues of being oriented towards domination system. So on the other side of the scale, we have partnership systems. Partnership systems focus on, rather than a hierarchy, we focus on a linking of different kinds of groups, and we see equality in those different kinds of groups. We see equality between men and women and everyone in between. We see equality in races. And what this creates is greater liberty, greater freedom of expression. We see human flourishing. And in our economic systems, we see that care is valued. So to recap that, in partnership systems, rather than a hierarchy of domination, we do have hierarchies, but they're hierarchies of actualization, where care is the foundation of seeing that people come up together. We see equality in gender and race. We see equality in people's choices around religion. When systems are oriented towards partnership, we see that we have caring government policies, and we're able to create an economy that is caring. We account for all of the sectors of the economy. Again, I'll share more about this in a few moments. Partnership systems does focus on free markets. So this is not about taking away a free market system. However, we focus on taking care of the whole rather than ignoring the costs that happen to human life and to our planet. And then lastly, one major characteristic about partnerism is at that fundamental root, the reason that we go back to those regressive dominator systems is because from childhood, it's been ingrained in us that we are to have these hierarchies, that one gender is superior to others, that one race is superior to others, and that children are to fall in line. So in partnership systems, we focus on developing human capacity for caring for each other, for nurturing each other, and we do that all the way from infancy. So this is the full scale as Rion created it. So partnerism defined in 5 steps is, first, partnerism is a social and an economic system that supports linking rather than ranking. And it has hierarchies of actualization rather than hierarchies of domination. And it invests in human capacity development from the time that we're born all the way through our life. Partnerism is also the opposite of a domination system, where hierarchies of domination are maintained through fear and force in all areas, ranging from on the small scale families all the way to our politics, our economics, and our education systems. Partnerism is the perspective required to develop our human capacity for caring. And it's that perspective regardless of gender, regardless of race, other categories. And it's the perspective required to care for nature. Partnerism is a new social category that transcends conventional ones, such as capitalism and socialism, such as the politics of right and left, such as religious and secular and Eastern and Western. And partnerism is a system in which the work of caring for people, starting in infancy, and caring for nature is highly valued, and it's rewarded in both the market and the non-market economies. And it's rewarded whether it's done by men or women. Partnerism, as I mentioned, was coined in 2000 by Rian in her book, The Real Wealth of Nations. So there's this age-old argument about capitalism and socialism, that one is better than the other. However, where does it fit into the scale of domination and partnership? Well, here's the thing. When we look at capitalism, it's had success in building a middle class. However, it's had tremendous negative impact on the planet, and we've also had a tremendous increase in poverty and issues in the richest countries in the world. So it's not without its faults. Same thing with socialism. Socialism was able to somewhat successfully bring a billion people out of poverty in China, but it came at the cost of human rights violations. So when we look at this, and we look at the fact that capitalism was invented in the 1700s, and we look at the fact that socialism was invented in the late 1800s, we can see that that was a time when women's work wasn't valued in the home, and women were really considered to be property of men. And as such, because there was no caring about valuing what was going on in the home, there also wasn't any thought about caring for our grand home, which is our planet Earth. And so the exploitation of our planet wasn't taken into consideration. So both capitalism and socialism were created in a time and oriented towards domination. And so that's what's at the source of the issues that we have with both of these systems and the taxing that we're seeing going on with the planet. What Rian introduced in her book in 2007, The Real Wealth of Nations, there's two different economic maps. She says that we currently, in these systems, both capitalism and socialism, only account for 3 parts of the real economy. We account for the market economy, the government economy, and we estimate the illegal economy. But there's 3 parts that are not valued and not accounted for, and those are the parts that really care about human beings and care about nature. So that's the unpaid economy, the household economy, and the natural economy. And in partnerism, we have a fully integrated economic map where those things are accounted for. So what's missing right now? What's missing is a tool that accounts for the trillions of dollars of value that's created every year, and that goes ignored and unaccounted for by GDP and its alternatives. What we need is a tool that will support politicians and support economists in really valuing the creativity and the work of human beings, that work of caring. So the Center for Partnership Studies, through Rian, has initiated creating a social wealth index. This is an education and policy tool. It demonstrates the value of caring for our people and our planet. It demonstrates the value of investing in developing our human capacity, starting from when we're children. It addresses the issues of the fact that both capitalism and socialism are way outdated. It's important to say that the Social Wealth Index is not intended to replace GDP or its alternatives. It measures what they do not. And it's really important to note that the GDP will go up even when there are things that take life or harm life. Cleaning up an oil spill, for example, counts as something positive in GDP. Selling guns counts as something positive in GDP. Selling weapons of war counts as something positive in GDP. So the real focus of all of Rian's work, if I were to sum it up really simply, is that this is about focusing on how do we develop people to be caring human beings. And one of the things that we need to do is we have to measure and value the fact that creating an empathetic, caring human being starts from the time that they're a child. And we currently don't value that, and we don't measure that. So a simple way to think about partnerism is that it includes everyone. And our goal, the purpose for this call today, is that we are out to make partnerism mainstream. And so now I'd like to take a couple moments to share with you about the Make Partnerism Mainstream campaign. In this campaign, we're kicking it off this year. Our goals, I'm going to share with you now our goals for the rest of the year. So first thing is we want to engage 100 members of the TED community. Secondly, we want to engage 50 intersectional leaders. And what is it that we want these 150 people to do? First thing is we want them to mention on their social media about Rian Eisler and about partnerism. Second thing we want them to do is write about partnerism and write about Rian. And the third thing we want them to do is interview Rian about partnerism. We want to get lots and lots of people talking about what the heck is this thing called partnerism. And I'd like to point out the fact that when capitalism, that word was invented, and when socialism was invented, those were new words. They were new isms. There was no precedent for them. They didn't exist before. And so that's what we're out to do now, is create an entirely new category. And this is where we need your help, because we need lots and lots of people talking about it. Our third goal for this year is to publish 3 articles in 3 major mainstream publications. So those could include Forbes, New York Times, The Atlantic, Guardian, The Economist. There are numerous publications that we could publish in. And we're looking for journalists to write a story about partnerism and about Rian. There's a variety of podcasts that we're interested in. We're looking for major cable shows that we'd like to have Rian on. What I'll ask you is to think through what kind of shows or people that you know that Rian could be interviewed by. So let's discuss the required tools for building a movement and making partnerism mainstream. The first is a partnerism website. So this is a website that's under development. We're going to be launching it in August. It'll be a home for all things specifically related to partnerism. This is a project that's sponsored by CPS. We need partnerism advertising content. So that's animated videos, memes, social media marketing materials, digital promotional materials. We need audio content. So creating content bites from the different speeches that Rian has given over the last few years. And then most importantly, we need people talking about the work and sharing the content. So the goal today is to share with you that we are launching an event on August 20th, 2020. It is the Participation Summit. The goal is to make partnerism mainstream. And before I open up the floor here, I'm going to post a link into the chat box. And if this sounds interesting to you, if you'd like to get involved, if you are a graphic designer, or if you know some podcasters who would be an interesting fit to interview Rian, if you know journalists who publish in mainstream newspapers, if you want to help with the administrative side of making this event happen on August 20th, those are all areas where we need help. So that's happening August 20th. And I'm going to post in the chat box now a link to a form, and you can sign up there while we're talking for this next portion of the conversation. So I'd like to open up the floor now to questions. I'm happy to review anything it just went over. Oh, excuse me. We're going to go to Rian first. Rian will share some thoughts, and then we'll open up the floor.
Well, I'm going to be very brief. First of all, thank you so much, Rosie. I think that this was a very excellent and really concisely summarizing so many important aspects. But the main thing for me is we urgently need a unified movement. Many of you are already working on different aspects of the shift from domination to partnership. But if we don't have this unified movement, understanding that we are each working on different aspects, whether it's racism, whether it's sexism, whether it's economic injustice, whether it's the destruction of our natural environment, think about it. We are all challenging one thing, a tradition of domination. And if we understand this, we can work together and we have a unified movement. And that's really what this is all about. We're not just off in some little silo, because one of the ways that domination systems maintain themselves is by fragmenting our consciousness. So right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, we forget two salient things. One, that if you think about it, there have been repressive, oppressive, violent regimes in every one of those categories. So none of them really answer the question of what do we need to build. It's not just deconstructing, it's reconstructing. And secondly, think about it. These categories either marginalize or just ignore the majority of humanity, women and children. And Rosie mentioned the family several times. People pushing us back, whether it was Hitler in Germany, the Nazis, Khomeini in Iran, the Taliban, ISIS, the so-called rightist fundamentalist alliance here in the United States, they all recognize one thing. They make it a top priority to either maintain or return us to what they like to call a traditional family, but actually isn't. Those of you familiar with The Chalice and the Blade, with Sacred Pleasure, with my newest book, Nurturing Our Humanity, which came out with Oxford University Press just a few months ago, know that we have a long tradition of partnership-oriented societies. They recognize that this male-dominated, authoritarian, highly punitive family is foundational to the domination system. And so we as progressives have to stop marginalizing these, what we have been taught in our universities to marginalize, really, as just a women's issue, just a children's issue. So I'm asking you to leave your comfort zones and to really, Einstein said it, and this is really where we are. We cannot solve problems with the same consciousness, the same thinking that created them. So you who are already working on different aspects of the shift from domination to partnership are the people who can bring this new consciousness and help us go to the roots of what we have to address and start taking into account childhood, gender, a new economics, yes, a caring economics of partnerism, and changing our stories and our language, because linguistic psychologists have long told us that the categories provided by a culture's language channel our thinking, so that it's almost impossible or very, very difficult to really see another possibility. So onward, we have work to do, and it's marvelous work. And one of the really exciting things about this work is that we are a community, we are a movement. And I thank you all, and I thank Rosie for really presenting so much so quickly. That was quite a feat. And I'm going to turn it back to Rosie.
We made it through on that in like blazing time. So Rian, let's see, I think Gina had a question here. So friends, please write in the chat box questions that you have regarding this topic. Before we go to Gina's question, I do want to say, so the summit on August 20th is going to be like a normal Zoom meeting where you'll get to see everybody, and we're going to have breakout rooms. And it's 2 hours from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, August 20th. If you click in the Google form that I've posted a few times, it has all the information there in the form. The breakout rooms, you can bring, you can invite your friends who have never heard of Rian. We're going to have a Partnerism 101 room, and there will be an information session about that, a really nice conversation. So if they've never heard about it, or if you want to brush up on your skills, you can join in that breakout room. We're going to have other breakout rooms focused on achieving these goals of getting 3 articles published in the mainstream, reaching 100 TED community members, reaching 50 intersectional leaders. And those rooms will be led by different people who are currently on this call, who have been supporting building this campaign. So I've posted the link a few times. Here it is one more time to if you'd like to support and get involved. There are tons of ways that you can help. As I mentioned, graphic designers, video makers, if you want to support administratively. If you say, I don't have any time, but I happen to know a couple journalists I'd be happy to introduce you to, that helps. That counts as volunteering. If you would like to support with listing different podcasts that you think Rian should go on, go to that form, click on that link, fill that out. There's a space where you can put all of those ideas and information. We really want to be in this conversation with you, and it's going to take more than a village to make this, to make partnerism mainstream. So thank you very much. So I think it was Gina, Rian, who had a question. She said, is it possible to have a partnership system is it possible to have a free market system and a partnership system? Are you able to have both of those things exist at the same time?
Okay, well, it depends on how you define free market. People like to define free in the so-called neoliberal. I mean, they're very good with language, the people pushing us back, by the way, because they call trickle-down economics neoliberalism when actually it's neo-feudalism. It is really saying to people, hey, content yourself with the scraps falling from the opulent tables of those on top, right? But if we are to have a real free market, everybody has to play by some rules, some basic rules. And the people who like to bandy this term around, really they use it actually to describe something where those who have the resources, who have the power, can do whatever they want. That is not humane, that is not environmentally sustainable, that is not in sync with partnerism. So if and of course we don't have a free market. Look at these major, really fiefdoms of the enormous corporations of what President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower called the military industrial complex. So yes, this was a long-winded way of saying absolutely. But this free market coexists with also community policies, government policies that are caring, that place caring for people starting in early childhood and caring for our Mother Earth as the guiding principles rather than what we have today. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Rian. So I just had a technological breakthrough. I figured out how to unmute people. So as you're posting questions, I'll choose some of you and take you off of mute. Raman is a friend of mine, and he is posting some interesting thoughts here. So I'm going to take him off of mute. Hopefully it's not putting him on the spot. Hang on.
Raman?
Okay, Raman, are you there?
Sorry, yeah, I had to click on the unmute box.
So Raman, where are you calling in from today?
I'm in San Francisco on Potrero Hill. It's a beautiful sunny day out here in California.
And Raman's a good friend of mine. He organizes the Good People Dinners. He's all about building community with good people and having real conversations that are substantive. He's also one of the most, he's one of the most well-read men that I know. So I'm really happy to have him here.
Thank you for inviting me. Did you want me to offer a question for Rian, or?
Yes, because I wasn't quite following in the chat box what your thought was there. So what's the question?
You know, I suppose the question I keep coming back to in many seemingly values-aligned groups or groups with, I think, confluent agendas, even if the framing and language is slightly different, is this question of repair or replace. In other words, in the best possible scenario for the framework, and this partnerism framework is new to me, is this a process of getting legislation passed and in some ways curbing market excesses as they exist now? I mean, for me, capitalism, it's in the name. It places the growth of capital as the prime source, the primary priority and primary source of effort. Capital growth, whether it is helpful or harmful to people or planet, Is there a way to repair that, in Rion's opinion, through legislation and other things, through changing the rules of the economy? Or would it be more fruitful to simply try to create new parallel economic systems that would make participation in capitalism either obsolete or undesirable?
Well, I think that's a very important question. And my answer is both. Because when we talk about repairing, we're talking about the short term. As we repair, we move towards replacing. And we are really talking about something very fundamental here, which is, first of all, connecting the dots, understanding that there's a reason why regressives focus so much on family, whether they're leftist or rightist, okay, capitalist or socialist. You know, Stalin was just as gung-ho in reinstating the quote traditional family as was Hitler. Okay, I mean, let's remember that. So what we're really talking about here is a process, but the replacing part requires one thing that has been missing. What do we want to replace it with? And as much as I think cooperatives are wonderful, in our inextricably interconnected world, they're not the only answer. For one thing, they fail to take into account something I write about in The Real Wealth of Nations, which is intra-household economic resource distribution. Now that may be a completely new concept to you, but consider that studies show that in cultures that orient very much to the domination side, in which, yes, male dominance, you know, the ranking of one form of humanity over the other form, and with it ranking anything associated with real masculinity, quote unquote, like violence, like domination, over anything associated with the soft, the feminine, like care and caregiving, that in those cultures, resources are not being used in the household to really help human development. And so women in these households are poor and powerless. Children do not really get their needs met. I am asking you to think of the whole system, just as regressives know it in their gut. So to answer your question, we have to have also, we wouldn't think of building a house, would we, without building the foundations. And we have to change from domination to partnership in 4 cornerstones. Childhood, because we know from neuroscience that what children experience and observe early on develops their brains very differently, and hence what they think is normal, natural, possible, impossible. Gender, yes, we've had a hidden system of gendered values. I just mentioned it, where anything associated with the soft or feminine is secondary, if at all considered important, whereas it's much more economically effective, a new economics and new stories and new language. Once we focus on building those 4 cornerstones, we will stop having these regressions, and then we can not only repair, but replace. And I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raman. Let's see. So Jai Sugrim, a friend of mine and Nyla's, says, we are intensely divided as a nation in America. Do you think some destruction is needed to pave the way for something new like partnerism? Right now, most people are not interested in the opposite of their own opinion.
Well, the destruction is happening. I mean, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which has really exposed the structural faults of our economic system. What has it really shown? It has shown that the work of caring for people, like healthcare, uh, caring for children, uh, caring for providing us with basics like food, that is the essential work. Caring for nature, of course, is a subtext here, because I think there's a strong argument to be made that the COVID-19 pandemic wouldn't have happened if it weren't for our absolutely failing to take into account the need to care for our natural life support systems. And by the way, if you look at both capitalist and socialist and anarchist theory, none of them take caring for our natural environment into account. For both Smith and Marx, nature was there to be exploited, period. So all of this really is part of the old thinking. And what we're talking about here is that it starts with a new way of thinking. And I'm going to try to make my answers shorter here so we can hear from more of you. So I will stop.
Thank you, Rian. Let's go to, let's see. As I'm scrolling through the chat box, I'm noticing that the men are posting questions. Ladies, would you please post some questions as well? I'm happy to call on you, but you got to speak up. Let's see, Dave Leiker, he read your article in Tikkun. That's the article on partnerism, post-capitalism, post-socialism. He says, you mentioned that the state of New Mexico has considered the use of the social wealth economic indicators in policymaking. What have been some of the challenges in getting governments to embrace partnerism?
Well, I think the reason that we're working on a social wealth index is that the existing social wealth economic indicators are 24 indicators. And that's hard for people to wrap their minds around. What we need, I mean, GDP is one number, right? It's a terrible number, as Rosie said. You know, it not only takes into account activities that harm and take life, like making cigarettes and the resulting medical and funeral costs, great for GDP, but it fails to include the most essential human work of caring for people and caring for nature. So what we're really talking about here is changing how we think. And yes, to answer your question, it has been difficult. They've considered it, but nothing has really happened. And as I said, that is why we are now have the funding and are in progress of developing a social wealth index that combines, updates, and to some extent really changes these indicators so that we have something that we can offer. And I'd like to really see that we have this movement that will popularize the notion, you know, we measure what we value and we value what we measure.
Let's see. Our next question is from Nathan. He says, is there a consideration to be explicit about partnering extending beyond human communities to touch directly on interspecies justice? So talking about nature and our animal friends on this planet.
Well, of course. I mean, partnerism recognizes the interconnection of all of the living, of all of the life on our planet. And it is very, very, very short-sighted to really destroy so many species, if only from a human-centric perspective. Because goodness knows what we're doing. I mean, we don't seem to know what we're doing here. So yes, but this said, we do have that's the way that the planet seems to be structured, is there is a food chain, unfortunately. I mean, that's how it's designed. And we have to accept that that is the case. Uh, so, to answer your question with one word, yes. Uh, when we talk about caring for nature, it's not an abstraction. We're talking about the whole of nature and maintaining that ecological balance that, as we see with the COVID pandemic, is in such terrible, terrible jeopardy right now.
Thank you, Rian. Matt Johnston, who's writing in from New York, says, I work with purpose-led startups who measure their work in for-profit and for-impact terms. I recognize the social wealth index enables a macroeconomic view of care, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about whether it makes sense for founding teams of companies to consider measuring their work in the context of partnerism. Does it make sense for individual businesses to begin measuring and representing their work in caring terms? Or does the work of making partnerism mainstream need to come first in a different way?
My goodness, I love this. Yes is the answer, a big, big capital yes. We need to have the entrepreneurship be guided by caring values, caring for people starting way in early childhood and even beyond, and caring for nature. And I would love to have you perhaps organize a group of young entrepreneurs and maybe old entrepreneurs, because I'm not young, but you know, people who understand that, hey, this is what's been missing. Uh, this is what's needed, and that we really have all internalized this hidden system of gendered values that devalues caring, the soft, the feminine, so that somehow there's always money. The whole reward system has to change, but this is a process. We have to reward the work of caring for people and caring for nature. And I would love to see you organize a group of entrepreneurs to really develop a charter for corporations based on caring principles. I love that. Thank you. I'm counting on you to make that happen.
That's great. Matt, what do you say to that? Write it in the chat box. Let's see. David would like to know, he says, how do we know, so in terms of the campaign, how do we know that we've arrived in making Rian and partnerism a household name? Is it the number of mentions, people who are registered or polled? Is it the leaders that mention and write and create are posted to the website, other collaboration tools? So I'll chime in here. So we're building this campaign from scratch, and we're building it on the 35 years of work that Rian has done and the community that is here today that has coalesced over the last couple of decades in supporting partnership systems and partnership studies. And last year in the summertime, Galia Bonarzi, who I believe is on the call, she organized the Bretton Woods 75th anniversary, where Rian was the keynote speaker for the grand dinner there. And out of that came a working group of very enthusiastic, passionate people. And those are some of the people who are involved in building this campaign. And so the reason we're having this call today is to bring more people like us who are enthusiastic, skilled, connected, want to help, have some time or don't have some time, but have some connections that they can share. And in terms of how do we know that we've gotten to it being a household name, we'll know that because you'll be able to say partnerism and people will say, oh, I've heard of that word. Now, it took a really long time for capitalism to become an understood household name. It took a long time for socialism, but we have the benefit of technology and connectivity. I would say that most people are probably familiar or have heard the word regeneration, or regenerative, which over the last few years has been working to supplant sustainable, to be something that's more nurturing. Seeing that word take shape over the last, I would say it's been 5 years, and actually see that come out is a testament to the fact that we can spread ideas much more quickly now. So we would love by the end of next year to be able to say the term partnerism and have somebody at the very least say, I think I've heard of that word before. And more so, we want to have more people saying partnerism is a real idea and a real system solution that we can use. So David, to answer your question, what are the specific measurables? We're creating that. Right now, what we have for the next 6 months are reaching those 100 TED leaders, those 50 intersectional leaders, those 3 published articles at a minimum. We'd like that to be at a minimum. And then we'll set the goals for next year of what it looks like. And we would love to do that with you. So if you know marketing professionals who are strategists who would love to have a chat with us, our door is open. We would love to talk with them and work on this with them. Okay.
Rosie, I'd love to answer Frances Solomon's question.
Please, right ahead.
Statement, because she says another way in which COVID-19 and partnerism are related can be seen in which countries have done the best in quelling the pandemic. Countries such as the Nordic countries that orient mainly to partnership, including in their leadership, and which countries have done the worst, countries such as the US, whose leaders orient extremely to the domination model. And yes, the relationship is clear. And really, it's up to us to also show everyone that partnerism is economically effective. And the Northern European nations like Sweden, Finland, Norway, where there were famines at the beginning of the 20th century, they were so poor, which are today regularly in the highest ranks of the World Economic Forum's global competitiveness reports, that have low poverty rates, low crime rates, not ideal societies, but they have moved more to the partnership side. And they have caring policies. And one reason for this is that the status of women has risen. And so there are about 40 to 50% of the legislature is female. And because caring, these soft, values, why is there in the United States always money for prisons? That's the stereotype, isn't it, of the punitive male head of household who's going to punish you. Why is there always money for weapons? The hero, the violent, masculinity, right? As domination, violence. And why is there never enough money for caring for people, for health care, for child care, even though we know that whether we have that high quality human capital needed, economists tell us, for the post-industrial age, flexible, creative people, etc., whether we have it or not largely hinges on the quality of care and education children receive. These nations have caring policies, universal health care, very generous paid parental leave for both mothers and fathers in those kinds of families, elder care with dignity, a focus on really highly accessible and very good quality early childhood education. It's not coincidental that they rose from abject poverty, starvation, to where they are today. So it's up to us to show this to people. And no, they're not socialists. They have a very healthy market economy. And it's not because they're relatively small and homogeneous. Think of all the relatively small, homogeneous nations that orient so much to the domination side. So I'm so glad you brought this up, Frances. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Carol Viporian asks, what do you mean by intersectional leaders? Do you have an example of who that would be? So Rian, would you answer what it is to be an intersectional leader? And then Lila, if you're there, would you give a few examples of intersectional leaders that you've seen out in the world right now?
Well, I think that what we're talking about in popular language means that they're leaders who understand the connection, who connect the dots between racism, anti-Semitism, economic inequality, the really discrimination against people whose identity, sexual identity, is not what, I mean, either one of these two gender stereotypes, right, that we have. But I see intersectional leadership as more than that. I see it as leadership that not only recognizes these connections, but that really cares. And unfortunately, some of the intersectional leadership has been battling with other leaders. And I think we have to understand that that's what keeps the domination system going. And that it's very, very important that we, I mean, to have, for example, call people who are not of a different kind of sexual orientation cis, to me, it's kind of a pejorative. It doesn't work. I think we have to recognize that everybody is entitled to their own particular sexual identity. And the same with other sort of in-group versus out-group thinking. So that's, but I'm going to turn it over to Lila.
Some of the different groups that I see right now who are doing very similar work out there are people who are looking at some of the different elements that haven't been valued well, like philanthropy. So there's a whole group called Vuli, led by, called the community-centric fundraising model. And what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of intersectional leaders, a lot coming from the Gen Zs that are looking at all of these systems that are broken and creating these teams that are so diverse that are truly looking at how do we build a new table. And another group that I think that's really interesting is led by Stephanie Camus, who leads Popworks, which is really talking about decolonizing and how do we really look at how a lot of these models have been created by a very small sector of the world. And my hope would be that we would be able to get all of these different leaders involved and be part of the creation of this together. So we're really bringing all of these new voices. And one other person is Gina Rosero, who is someone who has been a leader in trans rights. And she has a beautiful TED Talk where she actually comes out. She was a female model and people did not realize that she was a trans woman. And she has been very much involved in policy change and how do we move things forward. So my goal is that all of these leaders will be part of this conversation.
That is wonderful. That's really a very, very important step. Thank you, Nyla.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nyla. Let's see, Helene Brown asks a wonderful question. Does anyone think she could get on the Ellen DeGeneres show? And I, as a huge fan of Ellen, I will tell you, I sure think she could get on Ellen. Ellen loves caring for people and animals and the planet. Rion's work is so up Ellen's alley. The way that we get onto the Ellen show or any show is through people that we know. We have to find who her producer is, one of her producers, who's the talent booker, and then we just get her booked on the show. And in order to do that, we have to have some content created and in place. So that's really what we're leading up to, coming up to August 20th. I saw somebody ask, is there any information that we can share about this work? The answer is yes. We have one article that's pretty informative that Rion wrote in 2018. It's the Tikkun article. We'll be sending it out. I also saw that Anne posted it in the chat box much earlier. We have that. We're going to have an audio version of that coming out. And then we're creating a video. We're creating a new website that will explain everything really clearly. All of those things are getting rolled out in the next month. And we need help in creating content to tell the story in little bite sizes, and as Nyla likes to say, bites, snacks, and meal sizes. So we need help creating content. Getting onto the Ellen Show, got to spread the word, got to know a producer. That all happens through the people that we know. So if you're connected in Hollywood, if you're connected in the New York entertainment television production world, that is an area that we could use some help as well. Rian, do you think you could get on the Ellen Show?
Well, I'm ready.
That's the answer.
And I want to say something here. We have really been told a false story about, quote, human nature. And part of partnerism is really knowing that the evidence from both the social and biological sciences actually shows what I alluded to, that really the pleasure centers in our brains light up more when we care and share than when we win. But we have to create the reward system and the value system, and the value system comes first, that will really support the expression of these human capacities of ours for consciousness rather than denial, like denial of climate change. Yeah, that's part of the domination system based on denial. That for caring, for creativity, that is a wonderful story, and I think that would be a story I would love to explore in the Ellen DeGeneres show, because people need to know what the evidence actually is about, quote, human nature.
Yep. Max Morris says that Ellen gave out her text number not long ago. If we all text her, she's in. Joy, I agree. Max, we got to find that number. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to post the link again. Here it is to fill out the Google form to get involved. Please join us. What is available for you through this is being part of something that is meaningful, that creates more care in the world. The world looks like it does because humans have invented it to be this way, and we can unmake it this way. We can create systems that care. We can have a government that works. We can have a government that doesn't have infighting and party politics. We can have something where there's debate and disagreement, but it's done in the dome of caring. So please fill out that, the Google form there, get involved with us, whatever small way, big way, it all contributes and helps. I'm going to put Nancy on the spot here, and would love to have her voice chime in on this. Nancy is part of the campaign team making all of this go, and she is one of the most brilliant women that I know, and she's been chatting away in the chat box, and I would love to hear your voice. What would you like to ask Rian, Nancy? What are your thoughts here?
Hey there. Hi, Rianne. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you. Well, I don't see you, but good to hear you.
Well, I am right here with a big smile on my face and so excited. And a few of my friends are on here too. Dr. Lisa, who is a brilliant cultural anthropologist, and some other great people that'll be part of this conversation. And the chat we've been having is whether or not we think that the business world, or the corporate business world, is ready for a conversation around caring. And if we think that that's too soft a word and it starts to, like, you know, that we push too far away, back to your point, Rianne, about feminist ideals get kind of discounted and get out. And I am arguing that that's not the case. My experience is right now that business leaders, men and women across the spectrum, from huge companies like Microsoft all the way to smaller ones, are definitely opening to this conversation, and not just from a COVID awareness point, but frankly, that's great. I mean, that's the inflection point, like, great. But I don't think it's just a remedy. I think they're really opening their capacity. So Rianne, I don't know if you have a comment on your experience in the corporate world, but I'm very bullish that we can go in and that there's a conversation to be had. I'm writing about it. I'm talking about it. The more I lean into it, the more people open up and want to hear more. So I think it's a great time.
Well, I absolutely agree with you that there is today, this is the moment for us. This is the moment. And what I would love to see corporate leaders do is to re-examine and begin to change their reward system.
Yes.
Because the present rules of the game in the corporate world really reward domination patterns.
Yes.
And if we reward caring instead, think about that. reward caring in a tangible way, which in our culture, we have this invention called money, an economic invention. Yeah, I think that is very important. And
We
I'm
talk a lot
so
about aligning
glad that-
incentives, right? So I think Melissa
Yes,
Penn and I are having, so maybe part of the nomenclature thing is around, because I talk about compassion, we talk about empathy, we talk about collaboration under the dome, again, of caring, but that the idea is that we build much more humane incentive structures, because we often ask people to do one thing and we incentivize something completely different, and people are stuck in the crosshairs of that. And so that's one of the ways to redesign it.
Absolutely. And that really goes back to the question that was asked earlier. Are we talking about repair or about replace? It's both. It's absolutely both, because in changing the incentive structure, we are both repairing and replacing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's all designed in there. And that's why, again, I'm such a big, huge, as you guys know, advocate for partnerism. We're working on the website. I'm thrilled to be part of the comms team, because I think that this is fundamental to this really big shift that we're going to have as we move work in a really different direction and society takes a different look, and all the things that Rahman discusses at his Good People dinners come to fruition. This is sort of the underlying piece of it. This is the part that helps people make sense of it. And the minute we talk to people about domination versus partnerism, the lights go off. So it's I'm so proud to be a part of this work. Thank you.
And really, it is a consciousness that can make it possible for us to make fundamental changes. If we have a moment, I'd like to deal with the question of Rachel Dura on religious leaders. Look, yes, we have to talk to religious leaders and remind them that at the core of our religious traditions are partnership teachings, if you will, soft teachings of caring, of empathy, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But then we have this domination overlay that really they need to sort it out, and we have to support them. So let's not give up, because most people in our world today still consider themselves religious, and that is something that we have to pay attention to and change how the leaders in those communities think and what they preach. That is a very, very important area. And I love the way that there are people on this call with so many different focal points, because you're all, as I said, working on different aspects. But let's be strategic about this shift from domination to partnership, and keep reminding ourselves and others of these four cornerstones: childhood, gender, changing economic rules, and changing from this short-term thinking, like the annual report or the 6-month report, which incentivizes really domination, So people who rise to the top are the dominators. That has to change. And of course, story, narrative, and how they're all interconnected.
Wonderful. With that, it is the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up this volunteers town hall. I just posted the link again a few moments ago. Please click on that and add your name if you want to be apprised of this conversation and you want to chip in some way, including this idea of all of us texting Ellen DeGeneres on her text number. We're going to do that. If you want to text her today, go ahead. I think that we'll do a coordinated effort after this. We'll maybe put together a couple little memes to share with Ellen to promote Rian. And the more of us that text her, like if we trickle that in, we do that before the website launches, and then we do it after the website launches, we'll have the possibility of getting some traction. In terms of, is this recorded and are we sharing it? We will send this to you, the recording of this. We'll also send you a link to the Tikkun article that Rian wrote, and people are asking about the presentation slides. We'll send those to you as well. So thank you so much. It's been really wonderful. Rian, any last words?
Onward, and thank you.
Great.
Thank you. This is a lovely beginning, and I look forward to moving forward.
Indeed. As a reminder, August 20th is the Participation Summit, Make Partnerism Mainstream. That's 3 to 5 p.m. Thursday, August 20th. You'll receive an invitation to that in addition to our follow-up email from today. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon wherever you are.
Bye-bye.